So here we have the stock dividend and stock split practice sheet. And at the top, we can see information about the stockholders' equity section of this particular company. And the board of directors is considering a 13% stock dividend, which means that it would distribute 13% more shares to all of the existing stockholders. It's also considering a stock split, but I'll talk about that in another video. For now, we're going to look at the journal entry that would be made when the stock dividend is declared, and then next we'll look at the journal entry that would be made when the new shares of stock are distributed or handed out to the stockholders. So looking up here in the top section, we see this common stock has a $5 par value. There are 1 million shares authorized, meaning the company could sell up to 1 million shares, but they've only sold or issued 416,700 shares. All of those shares are outstanding, meaning this company hasn't bought back any of its own stock, so there's no treasury stock. So the first step in figuring a stock dividend problem is to figure out how many new shares of stock are going to be distributed. So we're told that it's a 13% stock dividend that the company is considering. So we're going to multiply 0.13 times the number of shares that are currently issued. And our answer, 54,171, represents the number of new shares that will be distributed in this common stock dividend. So we need to make a journal entry on the date that the stock dividend is declared, and we're going to debit the stock dividends account, and that's to differentiate these stock dividends from cash dividends. We're not paying our stockholders cash dividends, but just giving them new shares of stock. Our debit to stock dividends will be for the market value of these new shares of stock, and we're told the market value is $51 per share. So $51 times the number of new shares equals this debit to stock dividends. Next, we're going to credit a new account called Common Stock Dividends Distributable. And we're using the word distributable because at this point we're just declaring the dividends and not actually handing them out. And you'll notice that we're crediting this account for just the par value of the new shares of common stock. So this number of new shares multiplied by the $5 par value equals this credit. Later, we'll see that when we do hand out these new shares, we're going to transfer this amount into the common stock account. And remember, the common stock account only includes the par value of shares in companies that use a par value. For this the second credit, we're going to take the difference between the $51 market value and the $5 par, so that's a $46 difference, and that's the amount in excess of par. We'll multiply that $46 excess by the number of new shares, and that's going to be our credit to paid-in capital in excess of par on the common stock. Now notice if we weren't declaring a stock dividend, but instead we were selling new shares of stock, we would have this exact same credit. The debit would change to cash, of course, if we were selling new shares of stock. And this first credit would be to common stock for the par value, but this credit here would be exactly the same. So that might help you to remember that we need to credit paid-in capital in excess of par for the difference between the market value and the par value of the common stock. Now down below, I'm showing the journal entry the company would make when they actually hand out these new shares of stock. So here what we'll do is debit common stock dividends distributable, because now we are distributing them, so they're not distributable anymore. We're going to zero out this account with this debit. And we're transferring this balance into the common stock account, which again, remember this number represented the par value of the common stock. Finally, let's go down and take a look at the impact on stockholders' equity and the number of shares outstanding from this stock dividend. Here are all the figures before the stock dividend. Here are the numbers after the stock dividend. So we're just focusing on the figures in the red box. And what I want you to notice is that the total dollar amount of stockholders' equity stayed exactly the same. So all we're doing is shifting money out of retained earnings and into paid-in capital. So that debit to stock dividends, it decreased retained earnings, just like cash dividends decrease retained earnings. And then we shifted that amount into paid-in capital. Paid-in capital, remember, represents both common stock and paid-in capital in excess of par. And we increased those accounts in the paid-in capital section with these two credits from our first journal entry. Of course, this amount, the amount we credited to common stock dividends distributable, it got transferred to the common stock account in this second journal entry. So again, we're shifting money out of retained earnings into the paid-in capital section, but our total stockholders' equity balance stays exactly the same. However, we do now have more shares outstanding, which makes sense. We issued more shares, so that number has increased. However, the par value of our stock has stayed exactly the same.